When a biker gang caught a 14-year-old kid spray painting their clubhouse wall, they expected trouble. What they found instead stopped them cold. The message on that wall didn't just change one night. It rewrote 8 years of silence, honor, and a debt no one knew was still owed. The sun had already slipped behind the hills when the sound of rattling spray paint echoed against the brick wall of the Helltrackers MC Clubhouse. Inside, the noise cut through the low hum of conversation and clinking beer bottles like a knife. Hammer, the club's enforcer, a man built like a bulldozer with arms covered in faded ink, shot up from his chair. "Someone's outside," he growled. 3 members followed him through the back door, boots heavy on gravel. They expected the usual. Some punk kid tagging gang signs, maybe a rival crew leaving their mark. It happened every few years. Someone always thought they were tough enough to disrespect the Helltrackers. But when they rounded the corner, they found something different. The kid couldn't have been more than 14, maybe 15. Skinny, wearing an old jacket, fingers stained with black and silver paint. He stood frozen beneath a half-finished mural, spray can still in hand, eyes wide but not moving. Most kids would have bolted. This one didn't. "You've got about 3 seconds to explain yourself before this gets real ugly," Hammer said, stepping closer. The kid's jaw tightened. He didn't drop the can. He didn't apologize. He just stood there, staring up at what he'd created. That's when Lennox stepped forward. The oldest member of the club, a Vietnam vet with more scars than stories, moved slowly, his gaze fixed not on the boy but on the wall. The mural wasn't gang signs. It wasn't vandalism. It was a silhouette, a soldier on a motorcycle riding down a dusty road, helmet tucked under one arm. Below it, in uneven, trembling letters, were the words, "My dad died on this road. Please remember him." The anger drained from Hammer's face. The others went quiet. Lennox's voice came out softer than anyone expected. "What's your name, son?" The kid swallowed hard. "Jaden. Jaden Fisher." The name hit like a freight train. Mason Fisher. Hammer's eyes widened. Slick, the vice president who'd been standing in the doorway, took a step forward, his expression shifting from confusion to something heavier. Even the younger members, the ones who'd only been around a few years, straightened in their seats. That name lived somewhere in the club's unspoken history, half remembered, never fully explained. Mason Fisher had been a prospect 8 years ago. Quiet, disciplined, early to every ride. National Guard on the weekends. Always said he'd earn his patch after his next deployment. He never came back. An IED in Afghanistan. Route clearance mission. Gone in an instant. The club had mourned. They'd attended the funeral, stood in the back while the army folded the flag. But time moved on. New members joined. Old traditions faded. And somehow Mason's name slipped through the cracks. No one meant for it to happen. It just did. And now his son stood in front of them, spray paint in hand, trying to make sure the world didn't forget. "You're Mason's boy," Lennox said, his voice thick. Jaden nodded, his eyes glistening but refusing to let tears fall. "He was prospecting here, before he deployed. I found pictures, him in your shirts, standing next to the bikes. My mom burned most of his stuff when she remarried. But I found a box in the basement. Photos, a bandana, some old club flyers." His voice cracked, but he pushed through. "I was 6 when he left. I barely remember him. Just pieces. His laugh. The way he smelled like leather and oil. How he'd let me sit on his bike in the garage even though Mom hated it." Hammer ran a hand over his beard, exhaling slowly. "Why didn't you just come to us, kid?" "I tried," Jaden said, his voice harder now. "I came by twice, stood outside for an hour. But every time I got close, I saw you guys. The patches, the bikes, the way everyone looked like they belonged, and I just couldn't. My mom told me my whole life that this place took my dad away from us, that he cared more about riding and the club than he did about me. I didn't know if that was true. I didn't know if you even remembered him." The silence stretched. Slick finally spoke. "We remember him." Jaden's eyes snapped to him, searching for the truth. We remember him, Slick repeated, quieter this time. We didn't honor him the way we should have. Jaden looked back at the mural, the image of his father he'd spent weeks perfecting in a notebook before finally working up the courage to put it on the wall. This road, Route 19, it runs right past here. He used to ride it all the time, didn't he? Lennox nodded. Every weekend. Then he should be remembered here, Jaden said, his voice steadying. Not just in some cemetery 2 towns over where no one visits. Here, where he wanted to be. Hammer glanced at the others, then back at the kid. There was no anger left, just respect. Come inside, Hammer said. We need to talk. The clubhouse smelled like old leather, motor oil, and decades of cigarette smoke that had seeped into the wood. Jaden sat at a worn table, hands still trembling slightly, paint still under his fingernails. Around him, the hell trackers had gathered, some leaning against the bar, others straddling chairs backward, all of them watching him with expressions he couldn't quite read. Hammer placed a Coke in front of him. Jaden hadn't asked for it, but he took it anyway, grateful for something to do with his hands. So, Slick said, pulling up a chair across from Jaden. Mason Fisher, your old man. He paused, studying the kid's face, looking for traces of the man he'd known. You've got his eyes. Same intensity. Jaden looked up. You knew him? I was a full member when he was prospecting, Slick said. Younger then, dumber too. But I remember Mason. Everyone does, even if we don't talk about it. Why not? The question came out sharper than Jaden intended. Slick didn't flinch. Guilt, maybe. Shame. We told ourselves we'd never forget the brothers we lost, and then we did exactly that. Not on purpose. Life kept moving. New faces showed up. Old stories got buried under new ones. A younger member named Crow, who couldn't have been older than 25, leaned forward. I've never even heard that name before tonight. That's on us, Hammer said from the bar, his voice heavy. That's exactly the problem. Slick nodded, then turned back to Jaden. Your dad was different. Showed up, did the work, kept his mouth shut. That's harder than it sounds. He was National Guard, right? Jaden asked. Yeah. 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, that was the deal. But then his unit got called up for deployment. Afghanistan, 2016. Slick's jaw tightened. He came by the night before he left. Told us he'd earn his patch when he got back. Said he wanted his son to see him wear it someday. Jaden's throat closed up. He stared at the table, blinking hard. He talked about you constantly, Slick continued. Showed everyone pictures on his phone. This little kid with a gap-toothed smile, sitting on his dad's Sportster in the garage. He was so damn proud of you. I don't remember that, Jaden whispered. I don't remember most of it. You were 6, Lennox said from across the room. You're not supposed to remember everything. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. The old vet moved slowly, disappearing into a back room. The sound of boxes being shifted, drawers opening and closing, filled the silence. When he returned, he was carrying a leather-bound ledger, its edges frayed and cover cracked with age. He set it on the table in front of Jaden and opened it carefully, flipping through pages filled with names, dates, and notes written in different handwriting styles. Some neat, some barely legible. It was a record of every member and prospect who'd ever been part of the Hell Trackers, going back decades. Lennox's finger traced down a page until it stopped on a name near the bottom. Mason Fisher prospected March 2016. The ink had faded to gray, but the letters were legible. Nothing crossed it out. Nothing closed it. Just his name suspended. We never closed his file, Lennox said quietly. Never had the heart to cross it out. But we never finished it either. Jaden reached out, fingers hovering over his father's name. Why not? Because he never got his patch, Hammer said. Club rules are clear. You prospect, you earn it, or you wash out. Mason didn't wash out, but he didn't get patched in either. He was just gone. That's not right, Jaden said, his voice rising. He died serving his country. He would have come back if he could. That should count for something. You're right, Slick said. It should. Crow spoke up again, hesitant. Has anyone ever been patched in posthumously? Hammer shook his head. Not in this club. Not in the 40 years we've been running. Then maybe it's time we changed that, Lennox said. The room went still. Jaden looked around, seeing the weight of the moment settle on every face. These men, hardened, tattooed, rough around every edge, were wrestling with something they'd buried 8 years ago. Slick exhaled through his teeth. His army buddies scattered after the funeral. Haven't talked to any of them in years. Don't even know who's still around. Carlos is, Jaden said suddenly. Everyone turned to him. Carlos Reyes. He was in my dad's unit. He still lives in town. Works at the auto shop on 5th Street. He came by the house once, maybe 3 years ago, tried to talk to my mom about my dad. She slammed the door in his face. Jaden's voice hardened. She didn't want anything to do with anyone who reminded her of him. But you do, Lennox said. It wasn't a question. I need to, Jaden said. Because if I don't, who will? Hammer pushed off the bar and walked over, placing a heavy hand on Jaden's shoulder. Listen to me, kid. What you did tonight, that mural, that took guts. But it also opened something up that we should have dealt with a long time ago. He looked around the room. We owe Mason Fisher. And we owe this kid sitting right here. Slick nodded slowly. We need to call a vote. On what? Crow asked. On whether Mason Fisher gets his patch. 8 years late, but earned all the same. Jaden's breath caught. You'd do that. We should have done it the day we buried him, Lennox said, his voice rough with emotion. Better late than never. Hammer straightened. All in favor? One by one, every hand in the room went up. Unanimous. Jaden's chest tightened, tears finally breaking free. He wiped them away quickly, but no one looked away. No one judged. Your dad's getting his patch, Hammer said. And you're going to be there when we honor him. The vote changed everything. Within 2 days, word had spread through the hell trackers like wildfire. Mason Fisher, the prospect who never came home, was getting his patch. But this wasn't just about a ceremony or a piece of leather with his name on it. It was about finishing what should have been done 8 years ago. Jaden returned to the clubhouse on Saturday morning, this time through the front door. Tim, the club's resident artist and tattooist, was already waiting for him, arms crossed, leaning against his custom-painted Dyna. He was lean, covered in intricate ink from neck to knuckles, with sharp eyes that seemed to see through people. So you're the kid who's been making Hammer go soft, Tim said with a smirk. Jaden hesitated. I'm just trying to finish what I started. That mural out back? Tim pushed off his bike and walked toward the wall where Jaden's half-finished work stood. It's raw, emotional, but technically, it needs work. Jaden's face flushed. I did my best. I know you did, Tim said, his tone softening. And that's why I'm going to help you make it better. Not because it's bad, but because your dad deserves a masterpiece. Over the following weeks, the wall became their canvas. Tim taught Jaden how to layer colors, how to create depth and shadow, how to make spray paint do things Jaden never thought possible. They added flames around the soldier's silhouette, not aggressive, but warm, like the fire of remembrance. They incorporated honor tags for other veterans who'd ridden with the club, men whose names had also started to fade. At the bottom, Tim helped Jaden stencil a black ribbon with names in silver. Mason Fisher, Johnny Reaper Colton, David Hayes, Michael Norman. Riders who never made it home. Why do we forget? Jaden asked one afternoon, hands cramping from hours of detail work. Tim paused, staring at the wall. Because remembering hurts, and people avoid pain. But pain is how you know something mattered. Jaden nodded, understanding more than he wanted to. While they worked, Slick was making calls. He tracked down 3 of Mason's old National Guard buddies, Carlos Reyes, who Jaden had mentioned, along with 2 others who'd moved out of state but were willing to come back. Slick was organizing a memorial ride, something the club should have done years ago. Route 19 from the clubhouse to mile marker 19, where Mason used to stop and watch the sunset before heading home. But not everyone was on board. Jaden's mother showed up on the 3rd week, her car screeching into the parking lot. She stormed out, her face a mixture of fury and fear, and found Jaden on a ladder, adding final touches to the mural. "Get down from there. Now." Jaden froze. "Mom." "I said now, Jaden." Tim stepped between them, his voice calm but firm. "Ma'am, with respect, your son is doing something important here." "Important?" Her laugh came out jagged. This place filled his head with all that brotherhood garbage. Then he deployed and never came back. Now you're pulling my son into the same trap. "That's not what's happening," Jaden said, climbing down. "Dad didn't die because of the club. He died serving his country. He wouldn't have been in that uniform if he hadn't been trying to impress these people." She shot back, gesturing at the clubhouse. "That's not true," Slick said, stepping out from the doorway. He'd been listening. "Mason joined the National Guard before he ever came to us. He was a soldier first. We respected that." Jaden's mother turned on him, tears welling up. "You don't get to tell me about my husband. You didn't lose him." "I did. I'm the one who had to explain to a 6-year-old why Daddy wasn't coming home. I'm the one who spent years picking up the pieces." "And you did," Slick said gently. "You raised a good kid. A kid who's trying to honor his father. Don't take that away from him." She looked at Jaden, not at the paint on his hands or the defiance in his posture, but at the grief underneath. He wasn't angry or rebelling. He was grieving the same way she had, just 8 years delayed. "I burned his things because I couldn't stand looking at them," she whispered. "Every jacket, every photo, every piece of this life reminded me of what I lost." "I know," Jaden said, his voice breaking, "but I needed those things. I needed to know him." She wiped her eyes and stared at the mural. The soldier on the bike, the words, the names. It captured Mason perfectly. The way he stood, the quiet strength in his posture. She'd spent years trying to bury that image. Now it stared back at her, impossible to ignore. "He used to talk about teaching you to ride," she said quietly. "Every night before he deployed, he'd stand in your doorway and watch you sleep. He'd say, 'When I get back, we're hitting the road. Just me and my boy.'" Jaden's tears fell freely now. "I wish he had." She stepped forward and pulled him into a hug, holding him tighter than she had in years. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I tried to erase him. You deserved to know who he was." When she finally pulled back, she looked at Slick. "What happens now?" "We ride," Slick said. "Next Saturday. We honor Mason the way we should have done from the start. And your son is going to be part of it." She looked at Jaden, fear flickering in her eyes, but she nodded. "Okay, but he rides safe." "He'll be on the back of Lennox's bike," Hammer said, appearing beside them. "Safest seat in the convoy." Jaden turned back to the mural, now nearly complete. Tim handed him the final can of paint, gold, for the lettering at the very top. Jaden climbed the ladder one last time and sprayed the words carefully, each letter steady and strong. Mason Fisher, prospected 2016, patch 2024. Tim stepped back, nodding in approval. "Now that's a tribute." Jaden stared at his father's name, finally honored, finally remembered. "Yeah," he said softly, "it is." Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and the rumble of engines that shook the ground. Jaden stood in front of the completed mural, his heart hammering in his chest. Around him, motorcycles lined up in formation, hell trackers, veterans from neighboring counties, community members who'd heard the story. Dozens of bikes, chrome gleaming, engines idling. Lennox approached, carrying a wooden frame wrapped in black cloth. The old vet's hands were steady, but his eyes were wet. "Before we ride," Lennox said, his voice carrying over the crowd, "we need to do this right." He unwrapped the frame, revealing a leather patch mounted on black velvet. The Helltracker's logo, wings and skull, with a rocker beneath it that read, Mason Fisher, prospected 2016, patch 2024. The crowd went silent. This should have been done 8 years ago, Lennox continued. We failed Mason Fisher. We failed his family. But today we make it right. He handed the frame to Jaden. The weight of it felt heavier than it should have, like holding a piece of his father's soul. Jaden traced his fingers over the stitching, over his father's name. Thank you, he whispered, his voice cracking. Hammer stepped forward and placed a hand on Jaden's shoulder. Your dad earned this. Don't ever forget that. A figure pushed through the crowd. A man in his 40s with a military bearing and a scar running down his left cheek. Carlos Reyes. He stopped in front of Jaden, eyes locked on the patch, then on the kid holding it. You look like him, Carlos said, his voice rough. Damn near identical. You knew my dad? I served with him. I was there when. Carlos's jaw tightened. I was there at the end. Jaden's breath hitched. What happened? My mom never told me the details. She couldn't. Carlos glanced at the other veterans standing nearby. 2 men Jaden didn't recognize but who nodded in silent support. Then Carlos knelt down so he was eye level with Jaden. Your dad saved my life, Carlos said. IED flipped our vehicle on a supply route. I was trapped, bleeding, fire everywhere. Mason pulled me out, went back for our driver. Got him clear seconds before the fuel tank blew. Jaden's eyes widened. He saved you both? Yeah, but there was a secondary device. A backup IED the insurgents had planted. It went off while Mason was clearing the area, making sure no one else was in danger. Carlos's voice broke. He died making sure the rest of us got home. That's who your father was. Jaden's legs felt weak. Tim caught his elbow, steadying him. He carried a picture of you in his helmet, Carlos continued. Showed it to everyone. He'd say, This is my boy. I'm getting home to teach him to ride. That was his mission. Getting back to you. Tears streamed down Jaden's face. He looked at the patch in his hands, then back at Carlos. Thank you for telling me. Carlos stood and pulled Jaden into a tight embrace. He'd be real proud of you, kid. Slick's voice cut through the moment. Mount up. We ride for Mason Fisher. Engines roared to life. Jaden climbed onto the back of Lennox's bike, gripping the passenger handles. His mother stood near the clubhouse entrance, hands clasped together, watching. She gave him a small nod, permission, acceptance, maybe even pride. The convoy rolled out, a river of chrome and leather flowing down Route 19. The highway stretched ahead, the same road Mason had ridden every weekend, the same road he'd promised to come back to. Cars pulled over as they passed, drivers placing hands over hearts in respect. At mile marker 19, the convoy slowed and stopped. Jaden climbed off, legs shaky from adrenaline and emotion. Lennox handed him a wreath made of red, white, and blue flowers, and a spray can silver, like the paint on the mural. Jaden walked to the guardrail, the exact spot where his father used to park his bike and watch the sunset. He laid the wreath against the metal, then shook the spray can. His hand was steadier now than it had been that first night at the clubhouse. He stenciled 2 letters onto the guardrail. MF simple. Permanent. Remembered. Carlos stepped beside him and placed a folded flag on top of the wreath, the same flag that had covered Mason's coffin 8 years ago. He told me in his last letter that if anything happened, he wanted you to know he loved you more than anything in this world. Jaden wiped his eyes. I love him too. I just wish I'd had more time. You're giving him time now, Carlos said. Every person who sees that mural, every rider who passes this spot, they'll know Mason Fisher. That's immortality, kid. The ride back carried a different weight. Engines rumbled lower, steadier. No one raced ahead. When they arrived, Jaden's mother was waiting by the mural, staring at it like she was seeing it for the first time. It's beautiful, she said when Jaden approached. He would have loved it. I'm going to keep adding to it, Jaden said. Every year. For him and for everyone else who deserves to be remembered. She smiled, tears in her eyes. He'd like that. Hammer stepped forward with a small gift, a leather bracelet with Mason's name stamped into it. Welcome to the family, Jaden. You're not a member, not yet. But you're one of us. Always will be. Jaden slipped the bracelet on, feeling the weight of belonging he'd been searching for his entire life. The sun began to set, casting golden light over the mural. The soldier on the bike seemed to glow, riding into eternity, finally honored, finally home. Jaden stood beside Lennox, watching the light fade. His father's presence felt different now. Solid, real, like Mason had finally made it home. He's proud of you, Lennox said quietly. Jaden nodded. I know. And somewhere on that dusty road between memory and eternity, Mason Fisher smiled. Sometimes the loudest tributes are painted in silence. Jaden didn't just bring his father back to life on that wall. He reminded an entire brotherhood what it means to never leave a man behind. What would you do to honor someone the world forgot? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories that prove love and memory are stronger than time. See you in the next video.